So, hey, hello everybody. September 24th, another Python round. Last week, we got all the way through models last week, so I was actually really pleased. I know we had some views of last week's class too, so I have a feeling people caught up, which is good. Don't forget, all the classes are up on my YouTube channel, so if you ever want to catch up, you can just easily catch up there. So, as usual, opening with questions. Questions, and or did you do your homework? So everybody knows everything. There are no questions. Okay, well, if there are no questions, then let's, anybody have anything to show? Did anybody do homework? So you asked me to assign homework and then you didn't do it. Okay, I saw you tried. I saw your attempt. That's good.
Like the last two was not.
Okay, so what's a model?
Oh, man.
Data that stays.
An object that stays. That's what I call it. And so if you remember that, you'll always remember what a model is, right? So it's the equivalent to a database table. A model is a database table. Now in Django, each record is an instance of an object. So we can always get that same object back by just asking for it, which is probably what we're going to cover today, how to ask for those objects. But what's a view?
The display of that information.
Oh my gosh! Ben's going to get all the brownie points for today, right? You have a model, you have a view which looks at the data from the model, and in theory, a controller which controls putting data in and out of said models, depending on how you break down your MVC. Model view controller. Model view controller, viewer. It's a term, MVC, and Django is a framework specifically for MVC. So what goes in urls.py?
URLs. It's a way to map URLs.
It is the way to map URLs to views. So, what do we use to define a URL?
An IP address? No.
Yes, but I'm talking about in Django. In my urls.py, what do I use to define a URL? Answer, a regular expression. Okay, so, yeah. Gaining on it, a little bit of understanding. What is a template? A view outputs data somehow. Most of the time it outputs it as HTML.
Oh, yeah.
So our template typically is an HTML document. Now it can have some additional fun things inside it because it's dynamic. We can put Django variables inside our template that is then rendered into our web page. Okay, yeah, nothing up there, nothing to cheat off up there. You got to know off the top of your head. What goes in our settings.py?
The name of our installed apps.
Your installed apps most certainly go in settings.py.
Database we're using.
Yeah, he's looking at his settings.py. Yes, database definitions also go in your settings.py. So these questions hopefully will prompt you to think a little more in terms of the things I need to get out of this whole Django thing. Basics, model view controller, URLs, settings, these are the basics of Django. So you need to have those. In last week's class, I started from scratch, right? We did start application and actually started from scratch. So if you haven't done that, I highly recommend you do that. And if you follow last week's video, except for the star that you couldn't see, it should be very easy for you to do that and set it up from scratch. It'll probably end up looking more or less like this with your settings and URLs, everything in the right place. Other questions? I'll just start babbling technobabble here in a minute. Ay, 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 ay. You're quite the crowd today. Okay, so here we are. This is what I built last time for you. Get my phone out of my pocket so I can actually sit here. And manage.py is what? Really? By itself, nothing. What did I do wrong? This is my import. Where is it erroring? Why are we erroring? I just picked this up, shoved it in here. Require debug false. What is going on?
So, what do you look at to figure out why it's erroring?
At this second, I have no idea why it's erroring. This
cryptic.
doesn't make any sense to me right this second, and I'm half tempted to start from scratch. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the settings.py. Oop. Let's see, why are you freaking out? Django admin's happy. It's really strange. So I may end up starting from scratch just because it's being annoying. Hang on, I'm reading this error. It's quite unexpected. I'm in the right Python. Let's see if I have the right Django. 1.3, that's why it's erroring. Okay, I think I know what I did. I didn't use, yep, that's exactly what I did. Is that right? Yes. And I discussed how to get around this. I specifically did not get around it because because I didn't want to convolute the argument. All right, so now we go back to our temp. We go back into my project. Manage.py validate. And it works fine. It just shows you version matters. 154. Here's our nice URL. And that is correct because our view is at anything. Right? Remember this whole discussion from last week or no? Yes. A little bit of yes? A little bit of yes is good. My project, nice app, here's our templates. And let's have a look at this view here because that's what we're talking about. So, can you see? Can you see? I think we can see. Yeah, we can see. Good. So I'm going to go over this briefly again so we know what's going on. These are views. They are class-based views. I just had a huge debate with my team You all will use class-based views. This is not up for debate. If you expect me to look at your code, you will use class-based views. There is another way to do it. I'm not even going to show it to you because I want you to do it that way. I use class-based views for everything I do. The most common one is this, template view. Why? Because all it needs is a template. That's super common. So if I want to put an HTML page up, all I do is I make an HTML template, make a one-line template view, just tell what the template name is. Bingo, I have a web page serving through Django. Now, I got a little more advanced last time around and used list view, which is another kind of class-based view, except this view doesn't take a template, it takes a model. Give it a model and it generates a view. Now I do have to give it a template because I want my model to display nicely. So let's have a look at that template briefly so we can see what's going on here. Blog, I believe. Blog index is correct, I believe, as well. Oh, Word. Yeah, that's what it is.
Why does the one have the underscore and the one doesn't? It just at some
I
point
think it was a mistake.
Yeah.
I have a feeling. Yeah, same file. So I spelled it wrong in here. Yeah, see? It's using the one without the underscore, not the one with the underscore. And I wanted to look at this list view. That's really what I was digging for. Here's our my model list.html. Now you'll note here I had to tell it the template it was using. Note here I don't tell it what template to use. I simply told it what model to use. How does it know what template to use? Okay, I'll give you a hint. This is the template it's using.
Is it just default based on file name?
I'm glad you're here, Ben. Okay, so here's my model name. And here's the view type. And we assume it's HTML. Really awesome because it requires one less string-based constant. I hate string constants. This is horrible. This is really bad. In fact, the quotes are even wrong. It's so bad. Should be single quotes here. Anyway, here, this template name is generated dynamically. It makes my views pretty because I know what the template name is just by looking at my view. I'm all like, okay, that's my model list.html. No, it's my model list.html. Now, if I change this model name to Spartacus, right? It would be a nice app, Spartacus underscore list.html. Really nice. It's super crazy nice. Now, there are other kinds of views. Each one would generate a different secondary parameter to this file name. Now, I don't have to do it this way. I can also put template name equals underneath this model and specifically define what template I'm using. I don't recommend that. I recommend using this design pattern because it's really nice, very readable, fewer lines, more product. Okay, moving right along then. So,
If you go to to blog index, is it blog index underscore template.html? It's a template view.
No. With template view, you are required to define template name. It'll
Okay.
freak out without it,
Okay, but it doesn't automatically append
No.
underscore
and
template.
that's the exception to the rule.
Okay.
Okay, so here let's look at this template. Actually, we should probably really look at it. Oh, come on. And, ooh, I've got nice. Object list item 0 parameter name. Sorry, attribute name. So where's this object list come from? When I use list view, it creates object list. By definition, when I implement a list view, it creates object list in my template. By definition. Object list is obviously a list. And in a template, we can pick any item from a list by simply saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it will pick that the associated item. Now in this case, we know it's a list of model entries. And we know our model has fields, one of which is name. So I picked the first entry out of that list, and I want to see the name. Now, how do we call this? I don't remember. How do I figure out how I call this? Man, you guys, I think you're here.
What do you mean by calling?
Yeah.
Okay, how do I get to it? How do I see it in action?
Yeah.
How do I cause my model to show on that page? This needs to go back to being my model too.
Give that a page for it.
Right, and you are correct. I need a URL, which is what I looked for first. Maybe I did.
And URLs up high?
Yeah, I think I opened it in a strange place. Yeah, there it is. So I know I have a view. I needed to know how to get to it. And here's my view, my model view, right? My model view, which we instantiate here as my model view. So I know it's there. I just needed to know how to get to it. So I looked it up in urls.py. So if I put /my_model on the end of my URL, there we go.
Anything is the name of your site or project or whatever? App?
No, it's the name of the URL. And I will show you that.
Okay.
And I named it something funky on purpose. So I would show you that you can name it anything you'd like.
And you said the name of the test last class.
Yeah,
Otherwise it would be nothing.
yeah, see anything? So I'm including the URLs from a nice app, but I'm calling it anything. And you can call any URL anything you want. Nothing is tied to the infrastructure of Django. Now I do have to reference it correctly. Obviously this piece has to be right. But this can be literally anything you'd like it to be. Spartacus. Okay, so I go to /anything, and we see that it comes up nicely. Very nicely, in fact. Now, question is, here's anything, right? And here's my model. So, where to get test from?
That's you said that in the actual model view icon.
Okay, it's the model's data. So let's go ahead and look at that. So first off, I'm going to close these because we don't need them right this second. I'll leave this up because I have a feeling we'll come back to it. And I want to look at my models inside my app. Here's my model. It has two fields, name and created. So in my template, I picked name. I could, in theory, predictions.
It'll be followed by
Sorry. Can't see it. There you go.
test and the date.
3, 2, 1. It was definitely the very last thing I did at the end of class last time. That's funny. So here's my model. We have one record, record 0, and we have two attributes, name and created. Name and created. And I get to those by using Django variables. That's what the double brackets are. Better than Java, where you have to start and end and a semicolon and everything else. These are just defining a variable. So I'm going to put some more data in this data table, and then we'll start playing with this object list and see how it goes, unless somebody else...
I just have a question.
Ben.
So template as a name sort of seems to imply that you're going to be extending it and reusing it many times. So is there a point where it's not template anymore, or is it just templates extending templates and it's kind of just...
Depends.
Okay.
I've had templates without an HTML extension because I'm just importing some text into a file or something like that. But in my main production systems, templates call templates call templates call templates. So
Okay.
I build just the piece that I need here, and the template above that inherits that through an include. So if I just, in this HTML, I put the word include space and then the template I wanted to pull from, and it'll just shove it right in there.
Okay.
And you can pass parameters to that template and everything else.
Okay.
He says, so more template. We need to work more on templates, obviously, so good. For example, most of the time, the GUI around the outside is in my base template, and everything inherits from base.
Sure.
So when it inherits, it puts it in the center frame. So I actually don't have HTML start and HTML end in my template. I just have a snippet of HTML that's injected into the parent template.
So you can get a sort of CSS effect, but with like page layouts, not just colors and scales and stuff. Okay.
And that you can pass parameters, so I'd say include template.html space 27. It'll take that number and use it in the template somehow.
Okay.
So it gets to be very dynamic very quickly. Okay, I'm getting a little off here. Let's inject some data into this wonderful model that we have. Now there's a couple of ways we could do this. We could do it through the admin, which I haven't gone over, which I probably should go over today. But what we'll do instead is we'll just inject it manually into our model. My project, pie, actually, sorry, so we want this opens Python, but gives me the Django overhead. The framework is in place, so I can now call things. And we know we want from, I forget what I called it, a nice app. Yeah, so now my model is available to us. Now I used a star because I wasn't sure what was there. My model. That's much better. Using a star is a bad habit. Don't do it. Bad. Should explicit declarations prevent hacking, among other things. If you use a star for import, if I hack your submodule, your main module will never know. So explicit imports prevent that kind of de-separation. The other thing is when you're compiling an app, it's much better if you only import the pieces you need, because you may not need all the models. So if you import them all, you increase your RAM overhead. That's a bad practice, right? You want to keep your footprint as small as possible. Anyway, we have our nice My model. Last week I showed you how to get the objects from that model. What do I do, Kavita? Come on. My model dot objects dot all. Okay, I'm going to pause here and tell you exactly what I just did. This is the object class, right? And we know it's a model. We named it My model, but it could be named Spartacus, right? It doesn't matter what it's named. But here's our class for our model. Now we put a record inside that class and saved. So we have an instantiated record in our database. How do I get to the records in this table? The answer is a manager. Objects is the default manager in Django. So every model class has this attached to it by default. Now I can override that, and if we get far enough down the line, I'll explain to you how to override that. But here, it'll deliver everything that's in this model, unfiltered. You get all records. Now, I'm telling it all here because that's what I want it to give me. I want all the records in that table. There are other ways of getting records from that table rather than all, because most of the time I probably don't want all, right? All is probably an unusual case. Most of the time we're looking for one or a compilation of records, an aggregation. In this case, there is only one record, My model, right? So we have name and we have create date. Everybody follows so far, I hope? Now, what if I don't know its record 0? I do know its name. Its name is test. So let's look it up by that. Okay. Now, how can you be sure I got the same thing? Let's go back up here. Here's our first record. Where'd it go? Here I have name and created. You saw me call them. There's another attribute. Anybody?
ID.
ID. Who knew? Doug. You saw me type it.
I did. But
Ah, you're such a cheater.
I also knew.
Okay, so yes, every record you inject has an ID field, and that's an auto-incremented integer field, indexing at 1. There is never a record 0. Doesn't exist. IDs always start at 1, which is an interesting quandary because Python iterates starting at 0, so those differ. Okay, so here it is 0 ID, and I get 1. Now let's try my get by name. We'll put an ID on here. Result is
Same record.
same record. So yes, I looked up by name, but we could also look up by any of those other ID equals 1. Okay, now I believe it's I contains
Oh, test.
okay. Now I'm getting fancy because I'm trying to see who's actually paying attention.
Ignore case is the I.
Okay, so I pulled by name, test. I pulled by ID 1. Now I'm doing a text contextual search. And I'm looking for ES, which is the 2 middle letters in test. So I did return a record. Fairly cool. I think it's
Yeah.
spectacularly cool.
Is that what the double
If
is?
any of you have ever written a SQL query, it would take quite a bit for you to write a SQL query to do this. And yet I did it in just a few characters. Now you're starting to see the power of Django. I can build crazy queries in just a little bit of attention. So,
Irrespective of the data set, Michael, or is it
I'm sorry?
irrespective of the data set that we have? Like if there are a million records, let's say, would it return that fast?
I don't know about that fast because it's only one record. But if you're talking about a PostgreSQL database and you are the only person querying it, yeah, I bet it's really freaking fast.
I have a question. What if you do the same thing, but instead of contains ES, you just do contains S?
Okay.
So you'll also capture, or wait, no.
There's only one record right now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So let's create another record so we can stop
With an S in it.
acting weird. My model,
S in the name.
objects, create, name equals
Steve.
Okay, so now what's going to happen when I run this?
Got 2 results.
You're gonna get a record set. Oh, it doesn't. It only returns one. So it doesn't like.
You can only get one model at a time with get.
Ask it, ask it.
Where's the two?
Yeah, I want 2 records, right? I'm using the word get. Get means 1.
Sweet.
Oh, that's
Get 1. Filter many.
Maybe greater than one.
GT. Greater than one.
Oh.
Greater than, less than or equal to,
LTE.
GT, LT,
Greater than equal to.
GTE, LTE.
These are bash stuff.
Is that greater than or equal to?
GTE.
GT is greater than, GTE is greater than or equal to.
So the equal sign is just what the value of.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Filter is a,
Function.
Filter.
okay, it's a method, not a function, but yes. And so we pass key value pairs, right?
Okay.
You pass parameters into your function. You either do them as standalone or you pass key value pairs, right? So here we're passing key value pairs. And it actually takes this, recognizes that there's a double underscore, tears this out and says, okay, I'm looking for ID, and then it builds the SQL query for greater than or equal to.
Okay.
Amazingly functional, crazy out of hand functional. Now, it gets this double underscore. There's a ton of controls that you can use with that. I'm just trying to give you a general idea of how this syntax is working for us. So, got it? A couple of key things. Get 1 record. Filter many records. Now, can we filter off of more than one thing? So let's say ID greater than or equal to 1 and name equal to, what is it, test? So yes, multiple parameters.
So if you did GT instead of GTE, that'll return an empty set, right?
I believe you're correct.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I see. So all those are conditional, like SQL conditionals, handed together or something?
This is and.
Okay.
You can do or and everything else as well. It's a bit more advanced. Not quite ready to cover that yet. Some.
Yeah.
I use,
Bless you.
use something called a queue object. Look at the big brain on Brad,
I
man. What
did
the
that-
hell?
I did a tutorial.
Obviously.
It was good.
So
All right.
I'm sorry, how do you do a count of number of rows?
Let's have one that returns more than one. Yeah, okay. You ready? This is probably the most difficult thing I've showed you today. And this is a SQL count. It does not pull the records and count them. It actually does select star from X count. So it's actually a database function. It's not pulling the records and doing a len over the list.
So if I just have to count without that filter condition, then I can just remove that and say my model object start count. And that's it.
Actually, you have to define what objects we're talking about.
So it's all-
Leave it to the statistician to say, how do I aggregate? Okay, more aggregations coming because we can definitely grok a lot more. Okay, so let's look at our template where we were. Now, we know that object list is, and I'm just going to prove to you it's still returning the same record here. Right? We're still returning record 1. But we know that we have more than one record here.
That's
I'm going to save this and we'll go ahead and refresh our template here. Right? We know we have multiple items. So the question is, how do I nicely display these multiple items? And I've already gone over this in this class, so this is kind of a test. 4. Yes, that is absolutely correct. We iterate across our list. So now I'm going to use a Django control command. For item in object. Oh my gosh, I hate this keyboard. List. And this is the part that trips across most people, and for. Because we're working in templating, not in Python, indentation doesn't matter. We actually have to open and close our commands. So for item in object list, and what I'm going to do right here is
Print it.
item, thank you. And we're probably going to put a break here so they get on different lines. Kind of ugly.
It's not very useful.
Ah. Die, die, die. Of course that's what it did. That was pretty funny. Right? That was funny, right? Okay, good.
Python
There we go.
humor.
Yeah. Iterate. Iterate it across that list of items.
So these are the values in that table. So if I have to give the column names, like if there are 2 columns, like we have name and created at. So if you need like nicely arranged name and then created at and the values below.
Now, you want them in nice columns, an
The column
HTML
names.
table, or if you're badass like I am, HTML5 div table,
Okay, that's what I have.
right?
For the
And
poster.
here, just because you're forcing me to. I strongly recommend using div tables. I'm doing this because it's more readable. I hate this keyboard. Did I get it right? I did get it right. I'm going to take this break out. And let's ditch this nice thing here. We'll put another, MTD. Now we should have a nice little table that makes Kavita all happy. Let's do borders equals 1.
There you
sure I can do it this way. Yeah, there we go. Oh, now she's got a big smile on her face. Oh, yes, yes, like that, like that. So, yeah.
So, like, is there a simple way to like display a list of objects in the table without writing all this code?
Yeah, that's a good question. Without doing
Without
item
iterating
name,
across
item
the list?
No, not without iterating, but without explicitly calling out each column. Is that what you're saying?
knowing what the attributes
Because
are.
like in ASP.NET, you just have to give it the object and it will automatically build a table for you.
Interrogate the other.
And it can build pages of tables. So you can say that.
Is there any way to do like you know what you're saying? Like
Yes.
say item dot star or something like that.
No.
And break it out.
And the reason is, in my humble opinion, if you're doing that, you're going to use the Django admin, which is going to show you all the columns, all the data, paginated, editable. Haven't dealt with that yet. No.
That would be too really? I suspect the answer is yes.
Well, dig through. I'm sure I've got a snippet or two. I'm just talking about what's actually included with Django as a default install, not as far as I'm aware. I haven't covered the admin yet, which we should probably do relatively soon. I'm pretty sure I installed
Because
it.
you know, in admin, you can say that I want to add a filter, and it will actually build you a filter task box and all those things.
What he said. I have no idea. I'm not even sure I created a user. Oh, I'll deal with that. No admin this time.
And
I
is that
wasn't
how
going
it creates super users?
to. Yeah, I could go through that whole thing, but I haven't allocated the model to the admin either. So I'd really like to cover the admin as a whole. So we'll probably do that all next week. Other non-ridiculous questions?
Does that work with no SQL?
What does that mean?
Does it work with no SQL? The answer is yes, it does.
Nobody wants
But
to
you
ask
need to
questions.
use a special version of Django called Django No. No rel.
What it is.
Oh, what else?
Django No rel. If you do that, it works directly with no SQL.
Oh, look, I can open all my notes now too.
Oh.
How much is it?
Oh,
Very. Yeah, we currently use Mongo, and it's the same idea as NoSQL, right? And we use Django No rel. It functions just like a normal table. Now, you do lose a bunch of functionality. Obviously, there are no relations. So all this wonderful query language kind of isn't terribly helpful because you're working in a no-rel situation. But yes, it does.
More.
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 At least 13 minutes worth.
Yeah. See, we're out of time. More, but what is the question, right? Now what?
More aggregate functions.
Talk about packages.
Aggregations is what you're asking for. I'm sorry?
Packages. Syntax.
Syntax.
And Python.
I point you to the.
All right, I'll read a book.
No. Read a book. I already showed you one mistake I made, right? The quotes are wrong in my view. So. More models? You want to try a different model? You want to add to these templates? You want to try a different kind of view? All of the above? None of the above? So let's add another model, because that way we'll stay on track for model usage this time. Next time I'll go over the admin, and we'll see if you can come up with things for that. So let's try a different one here. Two spaces between the top level class. Name? Really? New model. Boy, how creative. Models.model. Okay, so we'll get a little fancy here. Yeah, we'll go ahead and stick with Charfield for the moment.
Don't we want the triple quote string to describe what our new model is?
Love you, Ben.
Like that. Is that the doc string or is that?
You know what? I changed my mind. I don't like this.
There you go, Ben.
Or are you going to blow that off?
Maybe it's not.
That was funny. At least it was supposed to be. And we'll put name in here, so we're talking about the same thing.
So
Now,
the value-
here, if I was to run this, it would actually create two tables, and that's not really what I want. So how do I deal with that? Okay, and now you're all like, what the heck is he doing? Okay, so I'm going to open the code so we can look at it at the same time. All right, so one of the big things I love about Python is working with objects, because you can have objects inherit from objects, which inherit from objects, which inherit from objects, and you can have an object inherit from more than one parent. At the moment, we're inheriting from one parent. So I created my base model, and then Ben's class inherits from my base model. So briefly, when I instantiate Ben's class, I get name, ID, and created. Why? Because created came from the model I inherited from. So I actually use this particular pattern a bunch because I have created and modified, created equals, modified equals. I use that on almost all of my models because I always want to know when the item was created and the last time it was modified.
If you define name in my base model, and then you also define it in Ben's class, are you overriding name?
Yes, this one overwrites that unless you super here.
Sure.
Okay, so you'll note that without this, it would have created two tables. Because I added this, it does not create this table, and I'm going to prove that to you right now. I ran a manage.py syncdb. What this does is create your tables in your database for you. So I ran this, it says creating tables. Now, this, my model, already exists, so it's not going to create that again. It already exists. This, we don't create because it's abstract. This, we create. And you'll see here, a nice app, Ben's class. Ben's class, and we are in a nice app.
What is class meta object?
Okay? So you'll note my base model was not created.
Yeah.
That's because my base model is an abstract class. I'm using this as my base for inheritance. I'm not actually instantiating this.
I understand what abstract means. My question is, what does class meta object mean? Like, is that whenever you want to define properties of that class that are
Meta properties of this class,
Okay.
and this is built into Django. It's not, I find that everywhere in Python. It doesn't work like that.
Okay.
In this particular case, the framework is looking for meta class of this model, and if it finds it, it acts on these and abstracts one of several things you could do. You make sort order so that things in the table always come out in a particular order. That would go in meta. There are a bunch of things like that that would associate with meta.
What does object refer to as an argument?
Superclass.
Okay. Now I covered this, so it's good to cover it again because it's very important. That works. What kind of class is it? Would be called an old style Python class. Because anytime you instantiate a class, you get an object. But this is what's called an old style object, and they don't compound well. If I make a new style object, everybody's happy. Everything works right. The object has all of its appropriate properties and can be passed around. So as a rule of thumb, / if you look in the Python standards that I gave you, it says explicitly always use object. So that's why I'm doing that there.
So if you didn't do that, what type would that be?
If I didn't do that, what type it would be? It'd still be an object. It just wouldn't have all the properties of an object. So x equals, let's try class, my class, pass. That's versus so that's, I mean, that's pretty explicit, right? An old style class doesn't have the ability to deal with inherited attributes, among other things, which is what is stored in this dictionary. So, yeah, old style objects versus new style objects.
So they're still both objects, but the one you inherit from object specifically, like that, gets all those
That's right.
attributes.
Better, stronger, faster, happier, more compatible. Okay, so I did that. We talked about iterating across multiple records. I know you want to do aggregations. I'm not going to start into that today. I guess I could make her really happy. What did we call it? My model. It needs to be my project. Oh, I'm just in a normal Python window. Now I'm attached to the Django shell, so we should be good. Yay, happiness. This is for you.
What, 2 underscores?
Aggregations. Now, if you don't like that they're in tuples, you can just tell it not to do it in tuples.
Filter for minimum date. Minimum creator is equal to the minimum.
Okay, so my model objects filter created that's pretty funny.
Received a native what?
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's just a runtime warning.
You ever received a naive?
Naive D.
A naive D. Yeah.
Okay.
Right? So a date is just like a name, is just like anything else. You just have to call it appropriately. So I used a date. This now is a datetime field.
Will you be able to, with the advent of quantum computing, be able to calculate objects created greater than or equal to now?
Maybe, Ben, maybe. Definitely plausible. If I get that spin going just right,
Right.
we should be good to go. Answered your question? Excellent. So, yeah, that's it for today. Next time, probably relationships. We have two tables that are related to each other. I think that's probably next up on my list, but we'll probably do the admin first, so this guy can stop asking strange questions. Good? Because the admin does it all for you. You don't have to do anything, not any HTML or anything else. You just say, go admin, and it's happy. So we'll do that next time. Thank you!
What do you call those conditionals that are after the double underscores? So how can we look up what we can do?
Oh boy.